Welcome to the Power of Music podcast, brought to you by JM International. Get ready to explore conversations with those making a difference through music.
Hello, and welcome to the Power of Music podcast, brought to you by JMI, Jeunesse Musicales International, the network of NGOs that empowers young people through music across all boundaries. In this episode, we're joined by Herrma, the director of Music Crossroads International, a pioneering program dedicated to empowering young musicians in Southern Africa. With a passion for music's transformative power, Joe has led initiatives that foster creativity, build resilience, and connect communities, ensuring that music is a force for meaningful change. Our conversation explores the unique role of music as a form of communication that transcends all barriers, even when all other communication isn't welcome. Joe reflects on the far-reaching impact of Music Crossroads, which goes well beyond empowering young people. We also learn how Elton John's Red Carpet found its way to a recording studio in Sierra Leone. We also delve into the art of creating win-win-win scenarios through music. Joe's experiences offer profound insights into the power of music to inspire connection and drive progress. As always, if you enjoy our content, don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate the podcast. We hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. First, can you share a little bit about your journey and how you ended up with the Music Crossroads?
I hope you have time.
We do.
My journey starts in London in 1981, where my parents got married and had a beautiful soul. So I was born in England, but my mother is from Colombia. My father was German, but he loved the UK and he lived there for over 2 decades. They moved to Colombia when I was a few months old. And I had, the privilege, obviously at the time I didn't know, I had the privilege to grow up around a city called Ibagué, which is labeled as the musical capital of Colombia. So without knowing it, I grew up in an environment that allowed and exposed and fostered young people with music from many different kinds, many different styles, all of the instruments that you you could think of. So that obviously ignited something in me and gave me the opportunity to try percussion, to try guitar, to try singing, and also created my first band at the time in high school. What it wasn't very present in my family, and I didn't know before I, let's call it, became a musician myself, is that my parents were very active in music in their young years, but that diminished quite rapidly as they were growing up. Some of them influenced by their own parents, saying, you sing every day. It's annoying. My mom apparently used to swing on her hammock, used to just sing melodies, make up lyrics to it. But her mom would ask her to please stop singing because apparently her songs were not the happiest. She was a bit dramatic, so that was stopped. Same with my dad. He used to sing with his brother in school in Germany back in the day. I mean, he was born in 1937. Sometimes they were cheered by the peers at school. Sometimes they were, look, he has a very high voice. Hey, you're a girl. Which happened to me growing up as well, actually.
A very high voice when you were younger?
Yeah. So I joined the choir at school and they put me in the soprano section.
So are we just figuring out that you're using this fake voice always in JMI?
I don't know what you're talking about. No, but yeah. And of course, when I had my band at school, it was kind of a rock band. So I always tried to sound deeper than I was. Not to say that I'm shallow. That's not the point.
And what was the name of your first band?
Laberinto.
Labyrinth.
Maze. Laberinto. What was that? It was just like the name. We had a name and also like a little motto behind it. Música Latina Alterna. We used to write our own songs. And actually, looking back a few years ago, I was talking to a friend. I used to sit there in math class and we had this, the school books with with the lines, with the cross lines. And I didn't know how to read or write music. The music theory was not a strong point at the school at the time, but it was basically more to get the students in touch with instruments and then teaching them how to play and how to actually create melodies and things like that. So I didn't know how to write music, but when I thought of a melody, I would just write dots in the square bits, up, down, and the times as well. So I kind of made up my own system of how do I recognize a melody, because often a melody would come to my mind, I think about it, and it's like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. But 2 hours later, I've forgotten completely about it. So I did that, and we were writing our own songs with my friends until I finished high school. And prospects in Colombia at the time, this was 1998, were not great. So my parents decided to try and move to Europe to see if we can provide our children with a better chance, which is what they did at the time. I always wanted to go back to London because that's where I was born. So I always had these dreams. I want to go back to my country. But my father was from Germany, so the first stop was Germany because there was still family there. I was at a point where I wasn't quite sure what to do. And the information available as to what you could do was not sufficient. I mean, now I can say it, but at the time it was not sufficient for me to have a clear idea of what prospects I would have depending on what I would be able to study or not. So I love music, but for me, if I would study music, so to speak, was like a 50-50 chance. I either make it big and be the next Ricky Martin, or I end up being a teacher. And I hate the prospect of being a teacher. Not that I ever taught, but for me it was like, oh, I don't want to be a teacher. Even though nowadays I do train people a lot. And I have joy in seeing how they develop when they actually do listen to what I say. Probably you're similar.
For sure. It's not that bad to be a teacher.
No. But so, of course, I was looking for something else to do. Something that I could still, I don't know. I didn't have an idea. And I came across audio engineering. So basically dealing with audio, recording audio, etc. And I thought, oh, okay, so I could still get a job, but I would still be dealing with music or sound at least. And this was throughout the time where I was in Germany. I was going to a music school, receiving vocal and guitar lessons. Super nice place with the perfect acoustics, things like that, as you're used to in Europe. And then I working at McDonald's at the time for 4 years in total. I got accepted at the School of Audio Engineering in London, the SAE. At the time, they had that also in Germany, but they would just do short courses. And I wanted to do a proper degree at university, or at least linked to university, which was the case with the SAE in London. So I moved to London in 2004, did a bachelor's degree with the Middlesex University and the SAE, finished in 2007. And right then at the time, I had a friend who was working for a charity in the UK called Christian Aid. And he was also a musician, is very passionate about electronic music production and things like that. But he was working at the HIV unit in London. And they had an idea because one of his then friends who was posted in Sierra Leone and were having challenges in getting across to people and transmitting a message that was health related, but also socially very related. It's about the stigma that people were suffering from who got infected with HIV. And what they were seeing is that the effect of being stigmatized by either friends or family or communities was in many cases much more harmful and sometimes lethal than the actual virus. And they were trying to overcome a barrier that they were facing. And I mean, one of them was the illiteracy. People, not everyone could read or write. And there was a lot of material to clarify about it. But there were certain beliefs that would stop these kind of messages from, let's call it the West, that were supposed to clarify. They were much against that. And all of the initiatives that they were using at the time, and especially the target people was teenagers. They gave us an example, they would go to a football stadium, and before the match starts, somebody would come on and try to tell them about the risks of having unprotected relations and things like this. And it was just not effective. They were being booed, and young people didn't want to have to listen to that. They wanted to have fun and watch the football match, for example. Anyway, so long story short, sorry for the long story. They wanted to try something new. And one of the things that in that context or, in that environment was always very welcome is music. It was, is, probably will be. And it's something beautiful. For the majority of the African continent, the musical traditions and the musical culture is something that is really part of their lives. It's uplifting. It transmits not only information or language, but a feeling as well. Anyway, so they wanted to try and transmit their information, to try and raise awareness about something. And they thought, why don't we use their own language, music? And they were called peer educators. So these were people that working with the charity, and they would go to communities and try to inform and try to say, here, there's some protective things for you, or this is how you can get tested. This is what it means to have it, what your risks are, what risks you don't have, meaning, you could still hug a person. It doesn't mean that you will be infected. There's no need to kick them out of the house or all of those things because they were happening. So I just finished, I just graduated. I learned how to record perfect musicians in perfect environments with the perfect equipment. And I had to go and set up a recording studio in a town called Bo in Sierra Leone. And I wouldn't call it the middle of nowhere, but it was a very long drive on a dirt road, carrying my laptop that I was able to save to buy during my studies. We didn't have any budget for equipment. The budget for this initiative was just the flights, the accommodation, and your subsistence while on the mission. And I knew that this trip was happening, so I had basically confirmed to it. And I was still working. I took a catering job to pay for my studies while I was in London. And among many events, we ended up working at very high-profile things, gatherings, receptions, whatever, and work for the Royal Palace and things like that. So many celebrities around those things. And we worked at an event from Elton John and his charity called Tiara, I think it was. So it was a Tiara Ball, something like this. They put up this huge marquee in his property, and it was all covered with this red carpet. This carpet that you use for events and then you throw away. So like one use carpet. But there was a lot of it left over. And I knew that I was going to Sierra Leone and we didn't have budget to buy acoustic material. So I asked the setup company, hey guys, can I take some of this carpet that you still have left over? I said, yeah, sure, it's going to end up in the bin anyway. So I took several meters of that, and then I took that with me to Sierra Leone. And this is what I was putting on the massive concrete walls of like 4x4 room that we were allocated to record the musicians. And I told them all, you're now entering in the studio that is covered with carpet from Elton John. And then that was not a lie. So we did that project back then. I wrote through my studies all of the audio companies that you came to know for support. We're doing this project. It's a great initiative. Would you help us with some equipment? We don't have a budget for it. None replied, apart from one single one. And this was about 2 weeks before we were due to leave to Sierra Leone. It was Focusrite. And they wrote to us saying, hey, sorry, I just saw your message. Do you guys still need support? And I was like, yes, please. So it was the only company that actually reacted to our message, and we went to meet them. They were at the time, this is 2007, they were at the time a relatively small operation in High Wycombe, the UK. And they gave us an interface, they gave us an audio processing unit, and they gave us also a link to a retailer in the UK, Studio Spares. From them, we were able to source cables and microphones, things like that, at a much convenient price. So we took this with us. We recorded in Sierra Leone for about 6 weeks. And we were together with a person who was doing animation at the time. And they were basically drawing all these things. An animated video came along with the music that we recorded to explain, with the target of raising awareness on this issue. We took all the material back home. I edited a lot of it, mixed it, mastered it. Back then with the 30-day trials that I used to have on mastering plugins because we couldn't afford the real deal. My friend and I did all of that work.
And back then there was no automatic random Gmail generator.
No. We had to work with manually. But I mean, for me, it was very exciting at the time. I learned all of the theory. I did practical in my study, of course, but this was proper field. This was literally in the field. And it went well. And the charity used this material and they did broadcasting nationally on the local television. They shared it with other NGOs like UNICEF, World Health Organization, and some of these entities used it. So it was actually welcome. And the aim was fulfilled. The aim of getting a message across using a different channel was done. So that box was ticked. Great. So the charity decided to take this on board and implement the same concept in other countries. So we created an organization, me and my friend, called In Tune for Life. So long story short, we did this 6 years in a row through different projects, different grant schemes. We went to Kenya, we went to DRC and Malawi. And in Malawi was an interesting one because we had a 3-year project. So we went to the country 3 times to record albums and 1 time before to do a research mission to see, are there any good musicians there? Are there musicians willing to talk about these topics? And, so we were put in touch with different people. We got connected to different organizations or individuals. Back then at the time, we went to the British Council. This is a British charity, so there was a direct link to that. And we met a very talented, very professional and inspiring person called Q Malowezi. He is a poet, but also very active in the music scene. He studied in Liverpool at the Lipa Institute, I think it is. And he immediately put us in touch with this organization called Music Crossroads. This is back in 2008. And while we were, we had our eyes and our ears very open, we traveled through the country. And although saying Malawi is a fairly small country, we end up working with Music Crossroads. Why? Because they had a network of musicians and they had the better musicians. And we found enough of them who were willing to do songs. So actually, we're already doing songs about issues like this. One thing to note about that kind of music was that even though they were singing, they were, talking about very serious topics and to some extent some taboo topics, the music was very uplifting and very catchy. And so when we were playing this to our friends, it was like, oh, wow, this is a really cool song. What is it about? And we tell them, yeah, this is about, HIV and how it affects this and does that and how you can protect yourself and so on. They will be like, oh, okay, cool. Because it sounded very uplifting, very cheerful. And this is one of the things that even though if you're dealing with a very serious topic, that someone in a different approach or a different transmission channel would not be interested to even listen to, music is a wonderful solution for that. So all of these young people who were before not willing to even listen about, use your condom perhaps, were suddenly singing these songs because they were catchy. So this is how I started working in Africa. Never imagined I would end up doing work in the continent. I mean, it was always interesting, but it happened in a way by chance. People say, you can plan however you want, but the universe will make its final decision. And it is a bit like that. I mean, I thought I would be, with my audio engineering, I would either be producing my own music or I'll be working in a studio. I always enjoyed a lot working with a piece of material that I would then shape in a way that it will sound better than before. So even though you have a great creator that you're recording, you can still enhance it a little bit. And I always had joy in that. So now we are in a context where musicians did not have access to not even a professional studio, a studio at all. And suddenly they were able to listen to themselves in a very different environment, in a very different quality, if I can say that. We were recording with proper equipment. I mean, I wasn't the best in class, but I think that I was doing a decent job. and to see the reaction when they were able to listen to themselves. And in Malawi, this is the effect that we had by going there 3 years in a row, is that the album we recorded the first year, the second year we went, the first album was on radio. So you had this artist that suddenly, we were, asking how it went, or maybe we were recording for the second time. And one time we had this thing, we picked up the artist and we were going to the studio. And while we were driving there, the song from the year before was played on radio, and just his face lit up and he was so happy. So, oh, look, that's amazing. I'm on radio. And it wasn't just the fact of being on radio, being famous, but I saw it in different recording sessions. After a long session, I would try and, do some bare, super rough mixes, and I would play back to them. They were all lit up and be so happy because they were listening to themselves and it sounded good. Something that they didn't have before, unfortunately. But so this was an effect that was happening that was not really a planned, so-called a deliverable of the project, an intention of the project. But this made the musicians happy. So you were fulfilling the need of the community by educating them on a certain topic. But at the same time, these guys who were transmitting the language, or transmitting the message, they were benefiting from it as well. And this is what really, it was for me very nice to be able, okay, I'm doing something and this musician is suddenly happy. I mean, I'm not pretending that they were not happy before. And that's sort of a generic thing with the continent. And I also have to admit, in the South American continent is similar. People are generically on a good mood. They're generically kind, but Africa is really on a different level. Super welcoming, super grateful for everything. Even though in environments where I've met musicians and that are not, well off is probably a term that is a bit elevated, but they're not so, financially secure. Sometimes really they would not know if they will be able to eat that evening. It depends what the father was able to bring back home that day. They will still offer you anything to welcome you in their homes, to make you happy and just greet you with a smile. And that is something that is very, it's not an infectious negative word nowadays, but something that, it also motivates you. And it's really nice to be in that environment where you can help other people see how they react to it and see how it has a positive effect in their lives. That kind of gave me an inspiration of doing that. Long story short, we do that, work with Music Crossroads in Malawi for 3 years. Then 2011 comes. Eventually, the financial crisis also hits our project, and there was no more funding to continue doing that. And so, but also I had put a sudden pause in my so-called career or life because my father was ill. I was living in London at the time, but I went to Germany because my father was given only 3 months left to live. So I thought, I'll put this on the side, I'll go. That ended up being 10 months and he was still coping. So, we decided I will go and resume my life. So I wanted to go back to London, which I did. I started looking for my old contacts, going back into the studio work and things like that. And suddenly I saw on Facebook from somebody who, the director of Music Crossroads at the time, had posted a job opening for Music Crossroads as a project coordinator. And having done 6 years of In Tune for Life, with still a desire to contribute to positive vibes, to happiness of young people in underprivileged areas, so to speak, or, disadvantaged setups, was still something that I like to do. So I applied for it, long story short, and I started in June 2012 with Music Crossroads International as the project coordinator for the Music Crossroads Academies project, which was at the time also a very new direction for the organization, as they had been for many years, as is a motto of JMI, to empower young people through music, to connect young people with opportunity to make music or know about music. But this Music Crossroads Academy concept was slightly different. They were really aiming to create music schools from nowhere because there was no such an activity or an entity on the countries where they were operating. And I found it quite challenging. I did not really think that I would ever go in that direction, but the opportunity came up and I thought, oh, that would be interesting. And so because I had met the director in one of my previous trips with the other organization, I wrote to him and say, hey, I saw that you guys are looking for somebody. Do you think I should apply? And they say, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, it would be interesting. I don't think that at the time he also knew what I was actually doing entirely back then. But I started doing the project coordination for this new project. And a year later, I was offered to take over the leading of the organization in 2013. So that's when I became the director of the Music Crossroads International entity.
I think you alluded to it already, but in JMI, we constantly try to remember and to remind ourselves of the why, empowering young people through music across all boundaries. And it's also a concept that has been featured in all the meetups and the trainings. And then in Cyprus, you said, yes, empowering young people through music across all boundaries, but I feel Music Crossroads does something beyond that or even bigger than that. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes, that is correct. Like again, when I first saw the opportunity and the idea was to empower young people through music, and because I had been working in several African countries before, I knew what that meant physically on the ground. Even though I grew up in Colombia, and in some places there's a lot of poverty. So before I even went to Africa back in the day, I thought, I have seen poverty, I'll be fine. But no. It was a whole new level. It was really a very, very different environment, a very intense, much, much more intense setup for this. And so empowering young people through music, for me, I think I already had an idea of what that was before I joined Music Crossroads. However, with the Music Crossroads Academy setup that we started in 2012, and we opened the doors in 2013, but to put a prospect to us, we had no teachers. We didn't have a curriculum that was ready to go. We had a period of, it was supposed to be a year, but because of several delays was reduced to 10 months to have a curriculum development, have teachers trained, and have locations that would be suitable to run a music school. So there was a lot of work. Thankfully, we had the support, or Music Crossroads had the support of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And at the time, it was one of the only few countries left that were actually supporting initiatives that had to do with culture and young people. A few years after that, it was basically the only one left. That's how it felt, at least. Every time we tell people about what we do, almost without exception, everyone says, oh my God, that's amazing. It's such incredible work you're doing. But when the time comes for you to actually seek support for this kind of work, it becomes incredibly difficult for different reasons, different priorities, and so on. But anyway, the power of music, or the impact that this kind of work has on people, goes beyond the opportunity for them to learn music, to learn an instrument, to get to know other artists and create bands. For some of our beneficiaries, it actually gives them an opportunity to remove themselves or to escape violent environments, toxic environments, abusive environments, potentially dangerous environments. And unfortunately, most of those environments will be their own families. And we've had a few cases in recent years where our students, eventually share with us what the opportunity to come and study music at this school, where they graduate, where they get a certificate, where their skills visibly improve in such a way that they can actually go out and stand on a stage and play or perform whichever instrument or art they do. And they are valued. They gain respect from within the families, for example, or they just gain status. A lot of these young people have had the chance to sustain themselves, to feed themselves and their new families. We've had a few situations where some of our alumni have eventually formed a family themselves, and they're all still performing in their respective, areas, be it performing arts or technicians. We have people who we have trained in audio engineering. We have trained people in instrument build and repair, gaps that we saw over the years. So the concept of the Music Crossroads Academies started to evolve with its own feedback, with revealing the gaps in the countries. What were we covering? What were we doing right? What were the things that we perhaps did not look at first? And all of these things started to come up, and we tried to address all of them as best as we could. And now, 10 years after running this project and after trying to establish 3 music schools in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, we have a much bigger feedback or a much better impression of what our work has and as an effect on not only the young people who directly benefit from the activities, who get the training, who are able to actually receive training, even if they were able to pay for this training. The fact that they didn't go to high school before would exclude them from a university training, for example. With us, this is not the case. You just have to show that you have a talent and, have a potential. We have had many students who come without knowing how to play an instrument or without knowing how to read or write music, but that's what we teach them to do. And we had, for example, a case of, we have a project called the Residency Scholarships, which is kindly funded by Focusrite. It's a company based in the UK, and they help us to cover the residency expenses. So it will be housing, will be a certain amount of food security, and local transport for young people who would not be able to come to the capital cities where the schools are located. So with the aim of removing barriers to creativity. We've been doing that for 4 years now, and it's been greatly successful. And one of the great stories out of that is we had a young lady who came to one of our schools, and she wanted to be a singer. She did not know how to do that, but evidently through the casting process, they found out that she had a talent, and she started with that. After 1 year of vocal, she changed into drums, and she's now a great drummer. So she's not doing a lot of singing, but she is a super powerful and passionate drummer, and now is playing in different bands. And actually not right now, because she's now got the opportunity to travel with a different project and is located in Norway, I believe right now, for the next 4 months still. So there are opportunities that allows the beneficiaries to grab chances to break barriers, not only in their own communities, but also geographical barriers. They can travel to places that never imagined they would be able to travel before. And it changes the prospect on life. It also changes, for some of them, they grew up in an environment where they thought they will never achieve this, they will never achieve that. There's always a limitation. There's never enough money for this. Sorry, but we cannot send you to this school. And they have a special talent that we were able to provide training for, and they just went with it. And they have not only transformed their own lives by virtue of becoming so good at something that evidently a lot of other people love, they are also positively contributing to their own communities, where the communities are now able to enjoy and appreciate a better, not better in terms of our music is better than yours, but in terms of the quality. They're able to work on their own music with tools that they now have and obtain through the training. So for me, even though it's not still, it is not concluded. It is a topic that it was open again. It was not just to empower young people through music, but now they're getting chances that are far broader than just being able to provide them with a link to other artists or a link to equipment and training that we weren't able to get to before. But it's actually changing their lives, giving them opportunities, and in some cases, removing them from harm.
We are recording here in Brussels during Imagine 2024. And I just did a workshop with all the musicians to ask them to find their why. And one of the artists here from Zimbabwe actually said, music transcends and music enables exactly kind of what you said, for me to see places that I would otherwise never have seen. What does it mean for you and for the musicians that they are here now, joining Imagine 2024?
We have been taking part in the Imagine program for several years now, mainly with Zimbabwe. And in the majority of cases over the past few years, it has been because due to the concept of Imagine, the artists are below 21 years old. So in the majority of them, it would be young kids or, a group of young people who have actually never been out of the country before. Some of them have never been on a plane before. And the majority of them would have never been out of Africa before. So it was the first time coming to Europe. And it comes with a lot of challenges that we would not think about. If you think, okay, we're going to get some flight tickets and we're going to get 5 people from this country and we're going to bring them here. There are many things that you would not think about if you have not been doing this for such a long time. For example, we are in Brussels now. It is the middle of December. It is actually not as cold as it could be, but it's cold enough. And because we had this experience a few years ago, one of the bands from the same country came and the musicians they only packed the sandals or the flip-flops. So the feet got rather cold strolling around town. And so this time we actually had to tell them, sorry, but we need to get you some shoes because it's going to be really cold. And they were like, are you sure? Because, I'm used to this. But, yeah, I know that you're used to that, but believe me. And then when they got here 2 days ago, they said, yes, okay, it's much colder than we thought.
I was with them 2 years ago with the flip-flops, and I felt bad. I got cold toes just from watching them.
Yeah. But, this is something that you don't... I mean, a lot of things I look back on what I've been fortunate enough to experience and to see the differences in where you are and what expectations you have. And also, you get used to doing things in a certain way that you cannot expect to know how it is going to be in a different location. I mean, for me now, I would say I've traveled sufficiently to know that if I'm going to a new place where I've never been before, my expectations must be very low. If I set expectations to a certain way, it doesn't matter on which topic. It's just like I've never been to the place. I probably heard a lot of there, but my experience there would set how I experience the location. But it's difficult to know these things. But the experience of all these years working with them, at least from the logistical point of view, has helped us to do that. Now, with this band here, particularly from Zimbabwe now, it was a special case because they were actually supposed to come last year. However, we encountered some issues with our partner in this particular country last year, which, one of the things was that, unfortunately, after the band won the national competition, all of the preparations and trying to fundraise for travel expenses and things like that were never done. And unfortunately, we only found out about this too late. We did try to save it at last minute, but it wasn't possible anymore. You rely on having to apply for a visa that takes 6 weeks, the minimum. And then you have to have a flight ticket booked, and there are certain things that makes the whole process a little bit more complicated than you would think. When if you want to travel from Brussels to Barcelona, it's something you can decide on last minute sometimes. But when you're trying to get a group of 5 people from Zimbabwe to Brussels, it requires a lot of planning and a lot of things that can and will go wrong happens. In this time, we have also a minor in the band. And I was speaking to him the other day. They arrived in Brussels 2 days ago. And he was telling me how, I love playing football. Do you think I can maybe find somewhere to go and play a bit of soccer? And I was like, yeah, sure. We can maybe find something like this. But are you sure you're going to have enough time? I mean, you have a couple of training workshops that are prepared for you, and then you have your jam sessions. And he was saying, jam sessions? What do you mean jam sessions? Yeah, all of the musicians go on stage, or some of them, and they just start playing something. It's not planned, it's not scripted. You don't have music that you're supposed to play. You just try and see how you can be creative with the other musicians. And then he told me, but I'm not very good at my instrument. And I said, what do you mean? Yeah, I only started learning bass last year. And I said, what? You started learning an instrument last year and you won a competition in your country. Like, that's amazing.
Nice.
And this is the youngest of the band. So we're dealing with incredible talent. And in very many occasions, you just find that this talent, I mean, there's only so much you can do when you don't have access to the tools that would help you to shape this talent. And some people will be able to do this work on their own because they're incredibly gifted. But it's something that is just out of the ordinary. And the majority of our students have incredible talent, but they would not have access to the tools and the information and the knowledge and the training that helps them to fast track the process into becoming a so-called musician. So it is great to see them here. It is great that we finally managed to get them across. And I have to say that we are very thankful to the organization called Africalia, who in the last minute were able to help us through the collaboration of previous years and working together. I think that they've seen what we have been able to do in the country, working with them and their support. And they kindly help us to get this band to Brussels to attend the international final of Imagine. And they are beyond happy. A fun fact, a funny story is a few weeks before they were due to travel, they took part in a band festival, a band competition in Zimbabwe. And they won a prize. And that prize was a certain cash amount to each of the band members. So they've been rehearsing. One thing is, when the opportunity to come last year was no longer possible, we offered each of the band members a scholarship at the academy because they were not students at the academy. And some of them, of course, apart from the minor, were able to take the scholarship. They've been receiving training at our music school. So we are hopeful to see what happens with them. But in fact, today, just before this interview, one of them wanted to turn his cash prize, which was not a lot of money, into his first instrument. So he is the guitarist of the band, but he does not own a guitar. And he had a bit of cash with him, and he asked us, maybe I can buy this, I can buy that. So we went with him first, and then we did our own research in several shops here in Brussels, and we found one. And just a few hours ago, he was able to buy his first guitar, and the expression on his face and the way you saw him lit up, it's just so amazing that they have the opportunity to be here, to do this. There are no music shops in the countries where we work as you would find them here in Europe. It is very difficult to get instruments there. And when you do have access to them, the instruments are quite expensive. So we help him in that way, and we hope that they will do a very good show on Sunday. But for me is the long lasting effect. If we are teaching people, if we are actually training them in something that they are able to craft their own skill, it becomes something that they have a gain and they have a profit from on a permanent basis. And that's, I think, the biggest impact of the academies is that really the people that go out, the majority of our alumni is working actively, so they are being employed, they are earning an income with what they have learned through us. The majority of them are active musicians, some of them are music teachers, some of them are working like with festival management, so they're still working in the music scene, but more on the administrative business area, which is a required part of the whole chain, the whole wheel for it to move. Some are technicians, some are building and repairing instruments, and some of them are doing something else. But even though if they're doing something that is not directly music related, they do say to us that their time at the Music Roses Academy shaped them not only as individuals, but as professionals, so to speak, quotation marks, as professionals, and they were able to profit from that.
You already talked about a few of them, but I know there has also been some challenges. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the challenges, but also about what keeps you going?
Challenges, there are many. Working in the environment in which we work, and the countries in which we work, dealing with the limitations, the broad limitations that are present in those countries, where a lot of people struggle financially with, the opportunities, health system, all of that, all of those limitations, all of those factors included do create for some of them, the need or the justified need to seek for alternative forms of securing your income or securing your, I don't know, I need to feed my family and I need to find full alternatives ways. It's just a difficult place. While we are working with funding that has been entrusted to us to allocate to the activities that are transparent and that are fair and that are meant to fulfill the purpose that we said that we would do, as with any NGO, we have a big responsibility. And there are limitations sometimes on the technical side, on the ground. We face many obstacles in trying to get things done without being forced. And this is unfortunately the word that I have to use. You are very often forced to choose a route that is not the correct route for you to take. Because this is how, let's call it, the system is done. It's how a system is made to operate, so that the official route will be a much more cumbersome, much more time-consuming and difficult to get to where you need to go. And the easier route will be basically you having to pay a little bit more on top. That is not correct. So we are faced with this on a daily basis everywhere. I mean, you find it in pretty much all over the world, but where we work is more intensified. It is definitely more present. We cannot work in that way because otherwise we wouldn't be able to obtain a cent to spend on our activities, on our projects. One of our biggest supporters is the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we are forever grateful for their support. They have been able to help so many young people over the years, and obviously help us to achieve that mission. And we are bound to zero tolerance for corruption policy, and that's how we need to operate. And sometimes it becomes difficult to some people. Sometimes you have many challenges. Sometimes you will have challenges on the ground, technically, like I said just now. Sometimes you will have to operate in a political environment that also brings its burdens. There are highly bureaucratical processes that you need to go through, either to seek support or to maintain support. Things like, for example, obtaining licenses to operate or approvals to operate from, let's say, the city council, things like this. Unfortunately, we find that those processes or those decisions are not just bound to, does this activity have a positive effect on the city, or is this something the city wants or not? But, how much is the city receiving from the initiative? And again, like, those are things that we cannot get into. Therefore, it makes our processes and our progress in those regards, which are required, much, much more difficult. I mean, it takes a lot more time, and you'll find a lot of opposition. And, at the end of the day, when you're trying to achieve something, unfortunately, time is also money. Because when you have to go to an office 3, 4 times, sometimes 10 times, and go to meetings where the people just don't show up, it is wasted time. And obviously, whoever went there could have been doing something else. As opposed to, if you give in to what they tell you should do, you probably have achieved your goal or your end task much faster. But then, unfortunately, you would have been giving in to a way of doing things that is fueling a system that, unfortunately, is quite strong, but it only has negative effects on everyone. I mean, if you look at how corruption affects many countries, you could even go as far and say that it's actually affecting people in such a way that sometimes they would not have access to medicine and things like this, which eventually leads to people not being able to hold on to life anymore. It's a difficult topic. And I also have to say, working in an environment like that, sometimes you ask yourself, is really what we are doing a priority? When you see that there are areas where there is also a lot of help needed, and that perhaps the priority list is very differently shuffled. Maybe what you do falls down the priority list quite far down. But you have to remind yourself that no one can do everything. And there are different sections, there are different organizations or different initiatives aiming to tackle those things. And we do what we can do. And in a way, inevitably, or just by virtue of helping other people, you are in a way also contributing to their well-being. We know for a fact that our beneficiaries do benefit from a better mental health through the activities that they get through us. I mean, music helps the human being to process a lot of things. So this is also an effect that was not initially intended. This is not something that we usually write on our project applications, but this happens. We are helping people in the human rights section. We are helping people to gain access to other initiatives that, for example, explain to them about reproductive health and things like that. We have partnerships with other organizations and we do such work together. So at the end of the day, we are contributing to better lives, even though we don't say that that's what we do, but that's what it translates to.
And of course, there's the constant struggle to find new funding, which I think is kind of prevalent in the entire sector. Without going too much in that specific topic, as we talked a lot about on the podcast, what keeps you going personally? Is it a performance like the one on Sunday?
Yes and no. Performance like the one on Sunday come together with an initiative of connecting people to music without boundaries. And like I said before, that is a great initiative. And this is what initially inspired me to join the course. But as the years go by and as you deal with all of the challenges that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and I was actually speaking to my work colleague a few days ago, going through a recollection of the recent weeks, don't have to go over a year because it was worse. But we were saying, if you were to write this down and explain to someone, what is it you deal with on a daily basis? It sounds absurd. It sounds unbelievable. All of the hiccups, all of the obstacles that suddenly appear that you were not expecting, it's just so much that it keeps you, you have a plan for your day or for your week or for your month or for your year, and it keeps you throwing you back. And it keeps you throwing you back. I was trying to explain to someone, it's like, we do 3 steps forwards and suddenly something comes up and push you 5 steps back. It's quite hilarious when you think about it. But in the recent years, for several years now, the burden of having to deal with the many troubles in the many challenges that we have to overcome in the countries, added or coupled with also political hurdles, not necessarily only in the countries where we work with the government entities or departments or things like that, but also politics within an organization like ours. We deal with other organizations as well. So, being part of a large network, for example, also brings challenges. There's a lot of people contributing. There's a lot of people with certain beliefs or opinions that are not the same of what, really translates into progress where we are. And when you are the responsible person dealing with this all the time, or at least having the responsible cap on, it becomes a burden. And for me, it has always been the ability to be able to visit the countries where we actually do the work and see the beneficiaries at first hand, see some of their students who are now able to perform. Sometimes we see some concerts from them. But from time to time, and for me is the most special thing, is when suddenly someone approaches me, unannounced, uninvited, and wants to say thank you. And initially, I don't know why. Thank you, Mr. Herrman. So, okay, sure. Why? No, for all the hard work you do. And I initially think, but you don't know the work that I do at my office. I just sit behind the laptop and try to get reports together or go through financial reports, writing new applications, responding to emails. But some people seem to be aware that the work that we do enables that the operations that are happening on the ground, that are the ones that are benefiting them, does matter. And for me, being able to see that our work has given people opportunity, has taken people out of abusive relationships or out of abusive environments. We have now a kid who is studying at a university in the US because he was able to obtain a scholarship to do that. And he was able to access that opportunity because he had a scholarship at our academy, and he studied there for 3 years. He learned for 3 years, and he became a really good singer. And he really worked hard for it. He was able to earn an income with it. He was able to rent a flat on his own. He even bought himself a car. He was living with the talent that he had. And, we gave him the opportunity, together with the Focus Red Scholarship, to bring him from his farm, his grandma's farm in a rural area. He lost his parents when he was young. And he's now studying in the US. There's opportunities that keep me going, and being able to help these people. And in a way, I hate to say we are making their lives better. It's a very big word. But from time to time, some of them come up to us and actually say that, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I really appreciate it. And I think that is what keeps me going.
If people listening want to connect with you directly, find out more about Music Crossroads online, or even in this crazy situation, give some money. And I know that already for a relatively small amount, you can pay for the education of one kid within the academies. Where can they find you? How can they support? How can they donate?
With the effort of investing the money well, we have not done very well at marketing ourselves. We try to invest in training and in the academies on the ground. So in the countries where we work, we're fairly well known. Word of mouth is a very big thing. And for us, we don't have the funding to invest in big marketing campaigns, unfortunately. But it means we're not well known or known at all in the West, so to speak. We have a website. It's called music-crossroads.net. But we are also on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, same with Music Crossroads. And each of our schools, called the Music Crossroads Academies, have their own social media accounts. On our website, you can see the work we do, and you can also see how you can help and donate for scholarships to our students. And we have 2 levels. We have a level where a student will get the tuition for free, so they can come and study with us without having to pay for it, even though the project that we are running subsidizes all of the operations. So basically, even the fee that people pay when they come and apply for a course, the academy is heavily subsidized by all the income that we get. Of course, we're an NGO, so we don't make any profit out of this. All the money goes there where it's needed. But we also have a residency scholarship part or option. And this has actually proven to be quite successful because the beneficiaries of these don't have to worry to find money to pay the rent, don't have to worry to, sometimes depending on the means that they have or not, we are able to provide a little bit of co-financing for groceries. So these young people are able to fully focus on their course, on their learning. And we've found in recent years that these are the ones that perform the best, because they can focus on this, and they don't have to go and how they say, hustle to see how they can get money to pay these things that thankfully the scholarship is paying for them. So this would be the best way to support the work that we do, which basically relates in supporting the young people that we benefit.
As always, the very last question: what is the power of music?
It is a big question. Based on my experience, for me, the power of music has not been measured yet. It does not only connect people, it does not only break barriers of beliefs, religions, language. It unites people, and in our case, with Music Crossroads, it gives people a life-changing opportunity in places where such opportunities do not come often.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. If you want more information about JM, or you would like to get involved, visit www.jmi.net. At JMI, we are on a mission to make the world more musical. That's why we created Mubazar, a digital platform that helps us manage all our musical activities across 80 countries worldwide, connecting musicians with opportunities to grow both personally and professionally. If you are a music professional looking for a better way to manage and promote your music activities, check out Mubazar. Created for music organizers, by music organizers, Mubazar allows you to run music competitions, workshops, camps, auditions, masterclasses, awards, events, and much more. Mubazar offers custom application forms, payments for your activities, jury tools, translations, analytics, and more. Mubazar is fast becoming the best place for musicians to find and apply for music opportunities online, and you can sign up today for a free organizer account by going to www.mubazar.com, registering, and then requesting to upgrade to an organizer on the right-hand menu. For more info, don't hesitate to get in touch via support@mubazar.com. It would mean a lot to us if you could give us 1 minute of your time and rate and review the podcast. In case you have any suggestions or would like to be one of our next guests, feel free to reach out to us through the JMI socials.